Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Hey friends, welcome back. We are kicking off 2023 with some amazing guests in the lineup, and I've got some incredible strategies for you coming up. So stay tuned. You're probably going to want to take notes on these next few episodes if you're not already, because we've got some great tips, some experts, and some really solid information for the nonprofit space for you, whether you're a grant writer or if you're involved with a nonprofit or a board member, volunteer. Good stuff coming up. One question that I often get is, how can we get grant ready? Or how can we find other funding of sources? And that's a very good question. And it's because a lot of times I talk so much about needing a grant strategy and needing to have other funding sources in place before you apply for grants. You need to be sustainable without grants, so then you're ready for grants to come in and enhance your program. Grant funders don't want to be your first dollar or your only dollar, so you've got to have other money coming in and consistently. And how do you do that? Well, that's a tricky thing. And that's the question every nonprofit asks, especially in the early stages. And I have a lot of small nonprofits that come to me wondering, how can we raise more funding? How can we grow? A lot of it comes back to strategy, making sure your board members are educated and well-equipped, and getting your team in place. You may remember if you've watched my TEDx talk, and if you haven't, go back and watch that. You can just Google me on YouTube. And I talk a lot about making sure you have your relevance, your optimization, and your interactions, your ROI framework, so that you can make your return on impact. One of the ways that I'm going to help you understand how to better do this over these next few weeks is by talking to different experts in the nonprofit space on other ways you can raise funds. Today, I am talking with an expert who has been in nonprofit work for years, probably 20 years or more. And it's kind of funny because last winter, I went to a conference in Milwaukee and I was presenting a grant writing workshop there. And then about a month later, I went to a different conference in Nashville and I met today's guest, Dave Raley. And it was funny, we were visiting, he had a vendor booth there at the Nashville conference. We were chatting and talking about how, I just went to Milwaukee and presented a workshop there last month. And we had presented workshops at the same conference in Milwaukee and didn't even know it. And then we met a month later in Nashville. So it was kind of a funny coincidence. But since then, I've gotten to know him and his work. He has a fantastic weekly email that he sends out, lots of good information. And I am excited for you to hear some of the strategies he talks about today. This branches out from grant writing, but it's very relevant to nonprofit work and nonprofit fundraising and really innovation. That's something I talk about a lot. Grant writing doesn't have to be boring. It can actually be pretty creative with a lot of problem solving and thinking through different angles and how can we best present this information in a way that's engaging and interesting. And Dave takes kind of that same approach, but in his areas of expertise that he's going to share with us today. So I'm excited for you to meet him. He is a consultant, speaker, and writer. He's the founder of Imago Consulting. And Dave helps faith-informed organizations generate profitable growth by developing sustainable innovation. And that's the key, right? Making sure our nonprofits are sustainable. Dave is also the co-founder and host of the Purpose and Profit podcast. That is a show about the surprising ideas at the intersection of nonprofit causes and for-profit brands. How cool is that? So without further ado, I am excited to introduce you to my friend, Dave Raley. Dave, welcome to the show. It's great to chat with you again. Tell us a random fact about yourself.
I am a huge Disney fan. If you're watching the video recording, you'll have already picked up on that. But I'm a daddy of 2 little girls, and I grew up in Southern California. And I thought, I grew up around Disney, but once you have kids and you take them, it's just like, the rabbit hole is deep.
You might as well just lean in. Awesome. Very good. I have been to Disney World in Florida, but not California. So now I'll know who to ask if I ever go there.
Oh, yeah. I've got all the tips.
Well, tell us a little bit about your journey and what's brought you to this point, how you've worked with nonprofits and just kind of what led you to that and how you got here.
Yeah. I remember being in college and being really fascinated with the idea of originally was the internet. I'm old enough to know that it was in the early days of the World Wide Web. And I just remember thinking, man, the computers and the internet are like such a huge part of the future. But ultimately realized that I'm a people person. And so writing code all day was not going to be my future livelihood. And so when I realized that, I had been introduced to some marketing classes at the School of Business that I was at. And that was just a light bulb moment that, I know what I want to do. I want to work with people around the idea of marketing and this. It wasn't called digital then, but, the internet, new media. And so that was a couple of decades ago. And over that time period, I've spent a lot of years primarily in an agency that works with nonprofit organizations, doing a lot of marketing, strategy, fundraising, and those sorts of things. And I was thinking about it the other day. I've worked with about 115 nonprofits over the last couple decades. So a few.
You speak the language well.
I do. I've been around. But really the last, I would say maybe 5 years or so, Teresa, I have been much more interested in innovation and how innovation leads to nonprofits thriving and growth. And I think I've found that a lot of nonprofits do talk about innovation and are very passionate about it. But a lot of times what they mean by innovation is program innovation. So better service delivery or more effective programs, which is awesome. But where I've been wired from a business background, certainly from a fundraising background, is to help think about the economic engine of an organization. And if we can invent a new way of doing our program, what is holding us back from scaling that? So it's a lot about growth, revenue, and innovation together. And ultimately that led to really thinking about what would it look like to create a consultancy that works specifically with nonprofits and businesses to help them with growth through innovation. And so hence Imago Consulting was born. And that's been something that we just launched out with this year and has been going really tremendously well. And good feedback so far. But it's one of those things where I've been in the industry for a while, so I shouldn't think I'm new at this, but I feel very new at this in another very real sense. So It's been a great journey.
Awesome. I know what you mean. Even though you're old pro to nonprofit work, this new piece is new to you. And so you feel like you're back at the beginning, even though you're not. You're coming into it armed with 2 decades of experience, but it still feels new. And yeah, I've been there, been through all the things. The podcast was very new to me and I felt like a complete beginner. But then pretty soon you get into the rhythm of it and you realize, okay, you can pull in some skills.
Yeah. I was thinking about this. Every new job I've ever had in my life, I think I've been about 11. the first year was like, holy cow, what am I doing here? Even senior executive jobs, it's not just the entry level jobs. And I'm sure folks that are listening can relate. It takes some time to really get, comfortable in your own skin. And so, but I'm a learner. I mean, that's as far as StrengthsFinder goes, that's one of my top strengths. And so the idea of like having to learn a new thing or a new way of doing things is kind of like, ooh, fun, keeps you sharp.
Yeah. I agree. I like that kind of stuff too. And that's partly why I enjoy the podcast and having guests, because it's always something new and learning from people that know different areas than me.
Yeah.
So what would you say is your favorite part about what you do?
I was thinking about that recently, and there's just something about this combination of, I'll use a very specific word, wonder, of just, I've always felt like part of who I was made to be was somebody that could really connect dots and kind of see trends and sort of understand things. That was honestly in the early days of digital. One of the main things I did was help translate for folks, all this tech speak and what was going on to, human speak and to understandable things. And so I feel like just that the teacher in me, the dot connector in me loves to see those sorts of things. But I'm also wired for it. In my opinion, it doesn't count unless it actually is built or implemented. And so there's a part of me that loves to, see what's coming next and, what sort of high level opportunities there may be. But there's just a very, I don't know, type A part of me that wants to see it actually happen in the world. And so the idea of being able to, with Imago Consulting, to bring those two sides together, where I actually get to spend half my time learning, researching, speaking at conferences and writing and doing those sorts of things that make me that much more sharp when I'm able to actually help an organization then implement those ideas. So it's been a fun combination.
Yeah. You sound similar to me. We both enjoy both of those sides of it. So what does this look like in practical terms? How would this apply? Say, give us an example or a story of how you would do this.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think when if somebody came to me and said, I want to help you with innovation and growth, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, it sounds awesome, but what is that?
Yeah. And it sounds honestly, innovation's a bit of a $2 word, and it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I always say, for some people, innovation's a 4-letter word, because it's like, we've tried that before, or that, somebody came.
Have time.
Innovation can be an excuse for a lot of, lack of discipline and real insight. So I think the best way to think about it is, coming in and coming alongside leaders and leadership teams to help them understand what their portfolio is. And in the nonprofit world, that can mean their programs, their income producing programs, for example. And a lot of nonprofits produce income in more than just traditional fundraising. Certainly, there's obviously a lot of grants, but there's also earned income and social enterprise and recurring revenue models. There's a lot of different ways that nonprofits can create economic flourishing to be able to do more of it, what it is they do. And so one of the main things I do is come alongside organizations to basically do a portfolio review of what are the things that you are doing that are producing revenue, with a particular focus on either things that are new and in development or that need renewal. So an example of that would be recurring giving. I believe that the subscription economy that we live in today, that we've lived in now for 5-10 years, has really transformed consumer expectations and consumer behavior. But we've also seen it transform donor behavior. And so from my perspective, I think there's a massive group of nonprofits that have not yet tapped into the subscription economy, so to speak. And so that's an example of a specific income, revenue program that a lot of organizations have, a checkbox on their website, or they have a named program, but it really doesn't have much meat on the bones, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so taking a look at that program, helping them to understand where their best growth opportunities are, and really creating an action plan and a roadmap to then take advantage of those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. It sounds very parallel to what I do with grants. Is a lot of nonprofits are sitting on a gold mine of resources they don't even realize. And some of that is a matter of unearthing that, uncovering that, polishing it off, and helping them understand how can we connect the dots to really make this gain some momentum. And it sounds like you're doing something very similar, looking for the hidden potential and then mapping out specific steps to help them understand how to actually implement.
Yeah. Well, and you think about your own expertise. I think it does take somebody with the depth of expertise to know where to prioritize the effort. And, I've been blessed to work across a lot of different nonprofits and a lot of different funding programs. But I know at least enough to know that there's a lot that I don't know. And so I have a pretty good sniffer for, it looks like you need help in your major donor, area. I've been professionally major donor trained and all those sorts of things, but I know that what I know is only a fraction of what others do. And so it's this, but you have to have the expertise, the depth of experience enough to know, okay, that's an opportunity. Let's get somebody in here that, that specializes in that particular skill set.
Right. To recognize those areas to begin with, and then be able to pull in the resources.
And if you think about it, to prioritize where the best next step is.
Yes.
I think in my experience, every client I've ever worked with always feels like they don't have enough resources to actually do all the things that they just should be doing. So they live with a lot of, let alone the things that they could be doing. There's I don't even have enough resources to do 1/10 of 1% of what I really feel like I should be doing as a leader. And I think leaders live with a lot of guilt when it comes to that, this feeling of like, oh, I'm only doing this, I should be doing that and the other. And so the way I think about it is if you have a coach, a really good coach in sports, for example, I'm not a very good golfer, but I'll use golf as an example because I have some brothers who are very good golfers, and one of them's PGA level. And
well, I'm sure I'm worse than you no matter what. So you're good.
You could try me. But I know actually a lot intellectually about golf. Like I've played a lot of golf. I've watched a decent amount of golf. And so if somebody came in and said, hey, take a look at my swing, I could give them lots of advice. Honestly, if I watch somebody swing, I'd probably give them 20 pieces of advice. Oh, you got to bring your elbow in here and you got to straighten your arm here. And, your follow through looks this way or whatever. But the real key is if my brother-in-law, who is a PGA certified professional, takes a look at that swing, he'll give them one piece of advice because he knows, there's 22 things that person did wrong, but this is the one, and they call it in golf a swing thought. This is the one swing thought that this person needs to have to help them break through. And if you think about your expertise, you're coming into an organization with a lot of experience. And you're able to say, yes, there are 22 things we should probably do here, but here's the first thing we should do. And I think that is something that you really bring with the expertise and the depth. And that's something I hope to bring to organizations as well.
Mm-hmm. So true. Such a good point. And sometimes we just need that. I'm really glad you touched on that feeling of overwhelm and all the priorities at once and all the hats and the things we're trying to juggle in nonprofit work, small business, whatever it is, because that is so common. And nonprofits do feel that pressure. And I think you hit it when you said they also feel the guilt. Like it's about this cause and this mission, and we should be doing more, but they're already pouring everything they have into this. So where do we draw that line? And that's where it does help to just say, okay, let's step back. Let's focus right here, make some progress and get this done. And then we can take the next step instead of trying to go all the directions at once and feeling the weight of that pressure on top of that.
Well, and sometimes it's just helpful to have that objective sounding board, outside input. I've got one client I'm working with right now that this individual, the core leader, could probably figure out 99% of what it is I'm bringing to the table, but they don't have 20 hours to dive into the analytics and to look at the customer journey and to evaluate these things and to think through just the way my brain works. What are the different business models we could be using here? And how do we approach this from a financial perspective? And what's the customer experience and what's the marketing look like? It's not that the leader doesn't have the like mental ability to do something like that, or even the experience, but sometimes it's just the capacity and the like. I heard a saying recently, it's really hard to read the label from inside the jar. And I thought, oh, that's so good. And we're all inside some jar, right?
Yes.
We all have the back of a label we're looking at, and to be able to be that for somebody is just, it makes me just glad to be able to be a part of that for some folks.
Yes, that's so funny you say that exact quote, because I used that exact thing just an hour ago when I was working with my VIP group of grant writers. One of them was talking through, I'm stuck on this, and I told them that exact thing. So that's why I laughed when you said that.
It's so true.
It is. And, with nonprofits, I think it is a different element because we do have that mission focus that we're bringing in, and we feel that responsibility or that burden, so to speak, in a different way that we feel compelled to give. And by nature, most people who work in nonprofits are sacrificing and giving. And so I think there is that balance of sometimes needing a different perspective or needing to just step back and take a break or whatever it may be, and figuring out how to prioritize the different pieces and moving parts.
Yeah.
Something I found, and I'm guessing you have too, another really helpful element when I'm working with clients is that I can say, based on my experience with this client a few years ago, here's what happened, here's what worked for them, or here's why that won't work because this is the kind of trouble you could get into or tangles, or here's how someone else handled it. And I'm sure with your background and different experiences, you can pull in the same and just, little snippets or examples that way to be able to share.
Yeah. I think the term, sort of psychological term that I heard about that is really, it's ultimately pattern matching, and humans are really good at, I've seen this many times before. This looks like another one of those. And I think that's just one of our really given, just wirings. But to your point, when you're able to do that in one specific area or with one specific type of organization or one specific discipline, that's totally, I think we take for granted that skill set, that when a client is coming to you or to me, there's that opportunity of saying, yeah, okay, I've seen that before. And that's honestly why I'm so passionate about helping organizations with innovation and new product development and new program development, is because honestly, I failed at it a fair bit. I've succeeded at it sometimes too. But I've also seen a lot of organizations in the different places where innovation falls down, and where we're really good at coming up with new ideas, and like we're always have a new initiative, but they never seem to stick or actually really get fully implemented. Or some organizations are really organizationally, operationally effective. They've got everything dialed in, but they have this sneaky suspicion that the core model is maybe a little dated, or maybe there's some disruption happening. Maybe there was a pandemic or some other, technological or program type of, cultural shift. And they're not quite sure how to develop a new way of doing things, and so no matter where an organization is at on that spectrum, the thing that excites me is coming in and helping to identify, okay, here's where it's not going well. Here's where the leadership team alignment, might actually help better. You've got this person, over here on the side that has a skill set that you're not tapping into. What would it look like to actually tap into that, for the purposes of, creating and, growing these different programs. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes that bit of refresher just helps kind of invigorate or breathe new life into the team. You just need that little space, little different, refreshing breath of, kind of a new wind, I guess.
Yeah.
What, as a fellow learner and researcher, what trends or, I guess, upcoming things excite you, or do you see about the sector in particular?
Yeah. I actually started a whole trend spotting newsletter. We can talk about it. But based on my belief that one of the most important things leaders can do first with a trend is just to notice it, just to know that it's there. The newsletter is called the Wave Report, by the way.
And it's great,
originally from Southern California, and so it's a surfing metaphor. So forgive me if you're not
very clever.
I'm not a very good surfer, but I think the metaphor works, which is just briefly, and to your point about trends, I think the thing that I learned about surfing that really ultimately has helped me think about innovation is that in surfing, I used to think of trends as waves, right? We got to get on that wave, the crypto donation wave, right? Now it's coming. We got to get on that wave. And when I actually learned real surfing, one of the things I learned was that you can actually miss a wave by paddling too early, just as much as you can miss a wave by paddling too late. And that may seem, I don't know, obvious in hindsight, but when you're in the water and a wave is bearing down on you, you think, I got to catch this wave. And so you start paddling, and you exert all of this energy. And oftentimes by the time the wave actually reaches you, you're not able to paddle as hard as you really need to actually get going the same speed as the wave, and you end up missing the wave. And I think trends and innovation are similar. I think a lot of leaders can get really wrapped up in, I got to paddle really hard. We got to expend all these resources to catch this wave. And, it's otherwise we're going to miss it and it's going to leave us behind. And I've seen just as much organizations run out of steam or budget or will or board approval to actually catch the wave by the time it actually gets to them. And so one of the trends I would say that has really stood out to me, and we're a few years into this trend, but this wave is right today, and that is the subscription economy. And what has been happening in recurring revenue models for organizations, certainly for businesses, but also for nonprofits, over the last 5-10 years has really transformed the way donors and customers think. And so that is, I believe that if you think about the traditional recurring giving models, one-to-one sponsorship, for example, or membership, those are the two most dominant models. Those have been around, by the way, for more than 100 years. Sponsorship just hit its 101st birthday this year. I don't know if you know that.
Wow, I did not know that.
2021 was the original first U.S.-based child sponsorship program.
Wow.
So these are not new models, but really the sponsorship and membership nonprofits represent about 25% of nonprofits today, which means there's 75% of nonprofits that have not been able to take advantage of this gold standard of monthly recurring giving until the subscription economy has really transformed donor expectations and donor behavior. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity for all nonprofits, but especially those that don't have the opportunity to do one-to-one sponsorship or membership models to actually take advantage of that and build a really robust recurring giving program. And so there's some really interesting work being done that way. There's a couple organizations that are doing really well. And that's something that I'm spending a lot of time continuing to research and learn and understand, okay, what are the best nonprofits are doing, and what can we learn from that to apply to other organizations?
Yeah, look at what's working. And just in case our listeners are like, wait, what's he talking about? Back us up and tell us what you mean by subscription economy, because some people that may be a new term. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
That's a great point. I think most people intuitively are participating in the subscription economy,
whether we know it or not.
But if you think about if you think about just your own personal budget and sort of consumer behavior or your giving, but let's just stay on the consumer side for a minute. Think about the number of products or services that you subscribe to today versus 5 or even 10 years ago. I could speak for myself. 10 years ago, the things that were on automated monthly, either credit card or check sort of debit transactions were my mortgage, my power bill, like what are called in banking non-discretionary payments.
Right.
Today, fully half of all automated payments are what are known as non-discretionary payments. Those are things like your Netflix subscription or your Amazon Prime membership or your, Hulu subscription or Spotify. Mm-hmm. You've got music, you've got video entertainment, but you also have software. I pay monthly for Quicken, which is kind of a bummer, but
mm-hmm. But you got to have it.
Microsoft Office, Adobe Creative Cloud, lots of platforms, Dropbox. The one that always kills me, Teresa, is people are subscribed today to their doorbell. Like, I don't know about you, but I am literally subscribed to my doorbell. I won't show it, but I get alerts on my phone all the time with the video doorbell service saying, oh, there was a cat, outside your front door at 2 a.m. And I got to pay $11 a month for that information.
To know,
peace of mind. So,
but you've got a picture of the culprit too.
I know. We live here in the Pacific Northwest, and I will say we just got an email from our neighbors. This has never happened to me before, with videos attached of a bear and a bobcat that apparently have been hanging out in the neighborhood. But today, thanks to the subscription economy, we have video recording evidence.
You have proof. Wow.
That's crazy. So anyways, but yeah, that's the subscription economy. And what that's done is that's really transformed the way people think about recurring transactions. Don't get me wrong, there's entire services to help you keep track of and cancel recurring services. But we've seen donors increasingly just willing to give on a monthly basis. There's some research that shows that over half of boomer donors already participate in a monthly recurring giving. And the key is they're not just giving to a sponsorship organization or a membership organization. They're giving to their local shelter, or they're giving to their local human services, animal welfare, all sorts of different organizations are able to tap into the subscription economy today.
Mm-hmm. That creates predictability too for the nonprofit and also for the donor for budgeting purposes. And then if they want to get beyond that, of course they can, but it creates a foundation of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about it. I remember I had a client a lot of years ago that came from the corporate sector, and he got in and he became the vice president of development at this very large nonprofit. And I remember he came to me with this brilliant insight that, what's wrong is, he said, our revenue is just like up and down. It's all over the place. Like at the year end, it goes way up, and then it goes way down, and then in the summer it goes down. And he's like, so here's my strategy. We're going to even out the giving. And this was 15 years ago. So I was like, that's not the way it works in the nonprofit world, at least in, direct marketing and mass fundraising. Like that is the cycle,
Yeah. And you want that.
Yeah. He wanted to like tamp down the high ends and bring up the low ends. I was like, that's a nice idea. Yeah. But to your point, monthly giving literally does that. It fills in the valleys. It helps, it's much more recession resistant, and it does provide that kind of stability that especially nonprofits have historically not had.
Right. And it gives donors the opportunity to support something consistently that they care about, and they can know that they were a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great insight. And I hope that gives nonprofits a different perspective and maybe some food for thought in that arena. Based on our previous conversation of the overwhelm, the priorities, how to think it through. Say a nonprofit is wanting to ramp up this part of their giving. What is one step you recommend starting with? And I realize every organization is different, but if we just boil it down to one practical next step, what would that be?
I think if you'll give me two, I'll give you two. The first is just to take stock of what you've got. And that is many folks don't really even know their current sort of numbers. And so I would say, look at your number of current recurring donors, the number, the revenue, and if you can, the long-term value. So number of monthly recurring donors, the revenue annually from those recurring donors, and then long-term value. And because until you know where you are, then it's hard to figure out where you can go. But some organizations, I've talked to some organizations and they have dozens or hundreds, and that's great. That's a good start, but that you're going to be at a different place than the organization I talked to yesterday that had 11,000, and the organization I talked to prior to that had 50,000. They're very different. You're going to invest at different levels and all that kind of stuff. Either way, the second thing would be I would prioritize your monthly giving program. And I do think that there is a difference between putting a checkbox on your website. Although if you don't have a checkbox on your website, you should have one. That's kind of table stakes. But really understanding what your program is and does it really have the kind of value proposition that it needs to have to be really thriving. I believe that regardless of what you do, as long as you have like a functional giving platform and a checkbox, the bare minimum, you will see your monthly giving growing. And I would venture to say that virtually 100% of organizations are seeing it grow just naturally because of the subscription economy. People are just choosing for convenience and for other reasons. But the question for me is not, is it growing, but how much can it grow? And that's where coming in and looking at the program and saying, giving a real honest assessment of like, yeah, we just have a glorified, check a box, it's got a name or whatever, but it's not necessarily really where it needs to be. And really be honest about that, and then chart your way forward from there.
It's a place to start.
Yeah.
But the key would be to make it as seamless and painless as possible for the donor without a bunch of hurdles. Like, check the box, here we go, done.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things we can do beyond that to really get it going. But the bare minimum is, there was an organization that I saw the other day that said, if you would, their donation page said, if you would like to give a monthly gift, please write us. And then there was a mailing address. So I'm still not even sure how you would, do you write them a letter and say you want to give monthly, and then they like write you a letter back, or, but don't do that. And no offense if you're listening here and that's your case, but just let's do something about that pretty quickly. Let people set up their automated giving.
Yeah. And shift the messaging a bit around that.
So if you don't have that, get that in order and you'll see an immediate uplift. But then the question is, where could you grow from there? If you actually really properly incentivized and thought about the value proposition to the donor. And we've got all sorts of processes to do to help that. And I've got some good connections on that front as well.
Awesome. Sounds like an amazing resource. Well, before we wrap up, would you share with us a resource that has been especially meaningful to you in your journey?
Oh, I read so many books and listen to so many podcasts.
You sound like me.
Yeah. I would say, oh man,
take your time. It's great.
I would say an oldie but a goodie. There's two books on messaging that are really great. Hopefully folks have heard of most of these, but one is called Purple Cow by Seth Godin. That's been around since the 90s. If you want just a good book on messaging, I've used it for many, many years. And then another one that is also about messaging and marketing is called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. And that's also about creating messages that are resonant and sticky.
I think I've read both of those. I know I've read one by Dan and Chip, but I think I've read them both.
I've got
Good
a
books.
bonus book. Those
Oh, good.
are very have been around for a long time. This
I
book
love bonuses.
literally came out as we're recording this 1 week ago. So this one most people won't have read.
Do tell.
I think it's a huge game changer, and I'm actually building the practice into my consulting work. But it's called Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni.
Okay.
And if many people have heard of Patrick Lencioni before, he's done some TED Talk type talks. He's written a bunch of books.
Yes.
The Advantage, Five Dysfunctions of a Team, The Motive. He's written a number of books that most folks have heard of, at least one of. The newest book is called The Working Genius, or called Working Genius. And it's based on a model that he and his firm developed a few years ago, right at the front end of the pandemic, called the Working Genius Model. Go figure. And I actually am speaking about it at conferences now because I believe it's so powerful for leadership teams and for all teams, honestly, to understand where there are gaps in how they're getting work done. And it's partly personality, but it's primarily a productivity tool. It's the basic idea is there's 6 different types of working genius. We all have 2 of them that are our, given gifts and really are geniuses, so to speak. And 2 of them are frustrations. We're not good at those. Those are gaps for us. And then 2 of them can be competencies. And if you look at the model, it's very simple, very easy to understand. And it immediately can show where you've got gaps. And by the way, all of us have gaps because we all have things that we're good at and things that we're not good at. And when it comes to getting work done or working in a nonprofit, where there's no exception there. Right?
Sure.
So it's a huge model. Sounds like you're familiar with it.
Awesome. I've heard several of his podcast episodes, and then I heard him interviewed on another podcast. And when I did, I was like, that totally makes sense. That I kind of geek out on that type of stuff anyway. So
lots of people do. It's it's not like, it's a little bit like StrengthsFinder in that it's strengths based, but it's not. StrengthsFinder has 34 strengths, and I can't quite I can remember my own, but I can't quite remember everybody else's.
Right.
How does that impact this project? I don't know.
Right. How am I supposed to communicate with you? Yeah. No, this way it's very practical and plugging people into your zones of genius, and which the better you understand that about yourself and other people, the more effectively you can use those resources. Like we were saying earlier of uncovering the gold mine, that's another aspect of that, of how can you best fit people into the right spots.
Yeah. And if you think about innovation, my core practice, is very central to innovation, because innovation is not just about ideas, wonder. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that's one of my geniuses, by the way. But it's also about implementation and getting stuff done. And you can't do innovation without both of those things and the middle part of that spectrum as well. So that would be the one book. And honestly, just take the assessment or listen to the podcast, like read the book later. The assessment's 10 minutes. I think it costs $25. I'm using it as a core part of my work with clients to really help uncover opportunities.
Okay, very good. Good to know. I will make the note of those and include those in the show notes too. Well, make sure to tell us, how can people connect with you online? And I definitely want them to know how to sign up for your email newsletter, because it's fantastic and I'm sure they'll want to learn more.
Yeah, no, that's great. So you can find us at our website at imago.consulting. Imago, by the way, is Latin. We were talking about that before we started recording. It's just Latin for the word image. So pretty simple. Imago, so IMAGO .consulting. And you'll see a link right up there at the top right that says Get Trends, weekly trends email. And that's the Wave Report. So you can sign up there. The other thing is I co-host a podcast with a friend of mine, Carly Berna. She's the vice president of marketing at a large nonprofit based in Arizona. And it's called the Purpose and Profit Podcast. And it's all about the ideas at the intersection of causes and brands. And again, with trends here, what can we learn from business and brands and different trends and apply to the nonprofit world? And then vice versa, what can nonprofit leaders and nonprofits help teach business and brands in terms of things that we know? And so we're just in pre-production on season 2. Season 1 came out earlier this year, and it's been very well received. And so looking forward to season 2. And we've had a lot of folks from places like Disney and Oreo cookies. We had the global brand manager from Oreo cookies. But we also had the chief revenue officer from Charity Water, and so it's quite a spectrum of guests, but it's just been a real blessing. And I encourage people, you can check that out at purposeandprofitpodcast.com. So it's a long URL, but pretty simple, purposeandprofitpodcast.com.
Awesome. Love that. And that's something that I've discussed too on the show before, is that importance of nonprofits need to pull in business skills, but also businesses need to pull in the mission-driven focus of nonprofits. And I agree. I think there's a lot to learn from each other and pool our resources. So thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And I hope nonprofits will take some notes on this and really think through how to evaluate and reconsider looking at their giving program and where can they improve, where can they find more resources that are right in front of them, and pull this together. So thank you for all your wisdom.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. It's been fun.
Great to have you. Friends, what do you think? Do you see how Dave's tips fit into that ROI framework that I talked about from my TEDx talk? The relevance, the optimization, and the interactions. We need all 3 of those things. And the concepts he was teaching us fit right into that. We've got to build that. We've got to strengthen our muscles. And I would love to hear your takeaways from this. I thought he gave some great information on recurring donors and some strategies coming up and kind of the latest trends and things that are working in the nonprofit space and in fundraising specifically. So I would love to hear which things you are interested in implementing and how you're going to use this information. I want you to take action. Don't just let this go in one ear and out the other. I'm glad you listened to this, but do more than just listen. I want you taking action. And if you need accountability, shoot me a message or come join me in the LinkedIn group. Whatever, find me on LinkedIn or the contact form on my website, and let's keep the conversation going. Tell me how you're going to implement this in your nonprofit work today. And remember, you can check out my TEDx talk. Go to YouTube and just Google Teresa Huff TEDx and it'll pop right up. If you are interested in becoming a grant writer, go check out my free quiz, Do You Have What It Takes to Be a Grant Writer, at teresahuff.com/quiz. All right, my friends, have a great week. Go take some action and go change your world.